The Night Stalker, Chapter 1, The Awakening. Detective Harry Bosch woke to the persistent buzz of his alarm clock. The sky outside was still dark, the early morning hours cloaked in shadows. As he reached over to silence the alarm, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at him for weeks. It was a sensation he knew well, a premonition that something significant was about to unfold. Bosch had been with the LAPD for decades, and in that time, he had seen the city through its many layers of corruption and crime. But recently, something had changed. The streets seemed quieter, more subdued, and there was an unsettling calm before the storm. It was in this uneasy stillness that the Night Stalker was rumored to be lurking. The Night Stalker, a name that struck fear into the hearts of both victims and the police force alike. It was a moniker that had emerged from a string of gruesome crimes that bore the hallmark of a methodical and elusive predator. A series of violent home invasions and murders had been attributed to this shadowy figure, leaving the city on edge and the detectives scrambling for leads. Bosch dressed quickly and headed to the precinct. The station was already buzzing with activity when he arrived. He was greeted by his partner, Detective Renee Ballard, who was poring over a stack of files in their shared office. "Morning, Harry," Ballard said without looking up. "You heard about the latest?" Bosch nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, another body was found last night. It's got the Night Stalker's signature all over it." Ballard looked up, her face etched with concern. The victim was a young woman, found in her apartment. No signs of forced entry, just like the others. "It's getting to the point where the city's terrified to even lock their doors." Bosch sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've been going over the case files again. There's got to be something we're missing. A pattern, a clue, anything that could lead us to this guy." They spent the next few hours combing through the evidence, analyzing the crime scenes, and reviewing witness statements. The pattern was clear. The Night Stalker struck with precision, leaving behind no physical evidence and always choosing victims who seemed to have no apparent connection to each other. As Bosch studied the latest crime scene photos, he noticed something that had slipped through the cracks before. A small detail in the background of one of the crime scenes. It was a faded logo on a wall, barely noticeable but distinct enough to catch his trained eye. "Renee, look at this," he said, pointing to the photo. "Do you see this? It's a logo for a security company. Maybe the killer is using their services to get past security systems." Ballard squinted at the photo and then nodded. "It's worth checking out. If the Night Stalker is using a security company to bypass alarms and cameras, we might be able to track down their records." Bosch and Ballard immediately set out to investigate the security company. They visited the office and spoke with the manager, who was cooperative but had little information to offer. The manager confirmed that their security systems were often used by various high-profile clients, but he didn't have any leads on suspicious activity. Frustrated but determined, Bosch and Ballard decided to dig deeper. They reviewed the records of recent installations and service calls, looking for any anomalies or patterns that might connect to the Night Stalker. After hours of painstaking work, they discovered that several of the installations had been made under false names and addresses. "This is it," Bosch said, his eyes narrowing. "We found a connection. These false addresses might be where the Night Stalker is setting up his operations." Ballard agreed. "We need to follow up on these addresses. Maybe we can find something that will lead us to him." They spent the rest of the day visiting the addresses associated with the false names. Most were dead ends, but one of the locations, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town, seemed to hold promise. The warehouse had been vacant for years, but had recently been leased to a new company. As they approached the warehouse, Bosch and Ballard felt the tension build. The warehouse was large and ominous, its windows dark and the area around it deserted. They cautiously entered, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, they found a maze of storage units and equipment, much of it covered in dust. But as they explored further, they stumbled upon a small office tucked away in a corner. The office was meticulously organized, with files and documents spread across a desk. It was clear that someone had been using this space recently.
Bosch rifled through the papers and found a set of blueprints for a high-end residential building. The plans were marked with various annotations and notes that suggested detailed knowledge of security systems. "This is it," Bosch said, his voice echoing in the empty warehouse. These blueprints could be the key to understanding how the Night Stalker operates. As they examined the documents, Bosch's phone buzzed with a new alert. It was a notification about another crime scene, a new victim found in a similar fashion to the others. The pattern was continuing, and the urgency of their task was more apparent than ever. "This case is far from over," Ballard said, "but we're getting closer. We need to keep pushing forward." Bosch nodded, his resolve strengthened. The Night Stalker was out there, and he was determined to bring him to justice. The hunt was on, and every clue brought them one step closer to uncovering the truth behind the enigmatic and dangerous predator known as the Night Stalker. Chapter 2. The Dark Web. The discovery of the blueprints in the warehouse office was a significant breakthrough, but Bosch and Ballard knew they needed more to pin down the Night Stalker. The blueprints suggested that the killer had an intricate understanding of residential security, which meant he had likely been planning his attacks meticulously. The following day, Bosch and Ballard met with a cybercrime expert, Detective Elena Garcia, who specialized in tracking digital footprints. They presented her with the blueprints and explained their theory that the Night Stalker might be using sophisticated technology to bypass security systems. Garcia studied the blueprints closely. These markings indicate a deep knowledge of security systems. If our suspect is using this information, he's likely tapping into various digital platforms to gather intel and orchestrate his crimes. Bosch nodded. "We need to find out if there are any digital traces linked to the addresses we uncovered. The killer might have used online resources or forums to gather information." Garcia set to work, diving into the dark web and encrypted networks where individuals with technical expertise often gathered. She began searching for any discussions or posts related to high-security systems, private surveillance, or even the specific blueprints they had found. As she worked, Garcia discovered several forums and chat rooms where users discussed the nuances of bypassing security systems. Some posts seemed innocuous, but others were more concerning, discussing techniques and tools that matched the Night Stalker's methods. One particular thread caught Garcia's attention. It was a discussion about bypassing security alarms and tampering with surveillance systems, with a user named Night Hunter providing detailed instructions. The user's expertise and the timing of their posts aligned with the Night Stalker's activities. Garcia shared her findings with Bosch and Ballard. "I found a forum where someone is discussing exactly the kind of techniques our suspect is using. The user, Night Hunter, seems to have extensive knowledge about security systems." Ballard frowned. "Do we know if Night Hunter is connected to any real identities or locations?" Garcia shook her head. "Not yet. The user's digital footprint is carefully hidden. However, I can dig deeper into their activity and see if there are any leads." With this new lead, Bosch and Ballard decided to focus their efforts on tracing Night Hunter's online activity. They worked with Garcia to monitor the forum and track any interactions that might provide further clues. The goal was to uncover the user's true identity or find a link to the Night Stalker. Meanwhile, Bosch and Ballard continued their fieldwork, canvassing neighborhoods and interviewing residents near the addresses tied to the false names. They sought out anyone who might have seen something suspicious or had any information about the security systems in those areas. During one of their interviews, they spoke with a local handyman who had recently worked in several of the properties linked to the false names. The handyman mentioned that he had encountered a suspicious individual who had been asking about high-security installations and seemed overly interested in the details. "This person was always wearing a hat and sunglasses," the handyman recalled. "They never gave their name but kept asking about alarm systems and security features." Bosch took note of the description and asked if the handyman remembered anything else. Did this person have any distinguishing features or details that stood out? The handyman thought for a moment. They had a particular way of talking, kind of formal and precise, and they seemed to have a lot of technical jargon at their disposal. Bosch and Ballard noted the description and continued their investigation, hoping to find more witnesses or corroborate the handyman's account. They also kept in close contact with Garcia, who was making progress in uncovering more about Night Hunter. As the days went by, Garcia's investigation revealed that Night Hunter had been in contact with several individuals who were experts in security systems and technology. She found patterns in the communications that hinted at a network of individuals who might be working with or supporting the Night Stalker. One evening, Garcia informed Bosch and Ballard of a promising lead. "I've traced Night Hunter's communications to a specific location, a tech repair shop that specializes in surveillance equipment. The user seems to have visited this shop frequently." Bosch and Ballard decided to visit the repair shop. They arrived at a nondescript building in a quiet part of town, its windows covered with blinds. Inside, they found the shop's owner, a technician named Kyle Reed, who appeared nervous when questioned about recent clients. Reed claimed that he had serviced various surveillance systems but was reluctant to provide details. Bosch and Ballard pressed him, showing him the blueprints and explaining the relevance of his work to the ongoing investigation. Reed's demeanor changed as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Okay, I recognize the designs. A client recently had a system installed using these exact blueprints. They paid in cash and insisted on anonymity. I didn't think much of it at the time." Bosch and Ballard took note of Reed's account and asked for any records related to the installation. Reed provided them with a file containing details of the transaction, including a phone number and a description of the client. "This is the phone number they used," Reed said, handing over the information. "But I don't know who they were." Bosch and Ballard left the shop with the new lead, feeling a renewed sense of urgency. They planned to trace the phone number and investigate further, hoping it would bring them closer to identifying the Night Stalker and stopping his reign of terror. The clock was ticking, and the pressure was on. Each new clue brought them closer to uncovering the true identity of the elusive killer and putting an end to the Night Stalker's terror. Chapter 3: The Silent Partner. The phone number from the tech repair shop led Bosch and Ballard to a small but well-maintained apartment complex on the edge of town. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where residents took pride in their homes and rarely caused trouble. Bosch and Ballard approached the building with a mix of anticipation and caution. They knocked on the door of the apartment associated with the phone number. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 30s with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. He wore a stained t-shirt and looked surprised to see them. "Detective Bosch, Detective Ballard." Bosch introduced himself. "We're investigating a case involving a recent installation of surveillance equipment. We believe it may be connected to some serious crimes." The man's eyes widened, and he stepped aside to let them in. "I'm Greg Evans. I don't know much about this, but I did have some work done recently." Bosch and Ballard entered the apartment, which was sparsely furnished and cluttered with various electronic gadgets. Evans led them to a small room where he had installed a security system similar to the one in the blueprints they had found. "Here's the system," Evans said, pointing to a series of monitors and cameras. "I had this put in about a month ago. I was just setting it up to keep an eye on things while I'm away." Ballard glanced at the equipment. "Did you have any special requests or modifications done to the system?" Evans hesitated before answering. "Well, I did ask for some custom features. I wanted the system to be able to bypass certain security protocols, but that's all I know." The technician who installed it was very professional and seemed to know his stuff. Bosch took note of Evans' account and asked him for the contact details of the technician. Evans provided a name, John Whitaker, and a phone number. Bosch and Ballard thanked Evans for his cooperation and left the apartment, heading back to their office to follow up on the new lead. Back at the precinct, Garcia was already hard at work tracing the phone number and trying to gather more information on Whitaker. She found that Whitaker had a history of working with various security companies and had a reputation for being highly skilled in customizing security systems. Garcia's search also revealed that Whitaker had been linked to several high-profile installations and had connections with various individuals in the tech industry. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the Night Stalker, making it challenging to build a solid case. Bosch and Ballard decided to visit Whitaker's address to question him further. They arrived at a modest house in a suburban neighborhood, and Bosch knocked on the door. Whitaker answered, looking somewhat wary but willing to speak with them. "Detective Bosch, Detective Ballard," Whitaker said, shaking their hands. "What can I do for you?" "We're investigating a series of crimes and are following up on the security systems you've installed," Ballard explained. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about your recent work and any clients you've had." Whitaker invited them inside and led them to his home office, where he kept records of his installations and clients. As they reviewed the records, Whitaker explained that he had been busy with various projects but couldn't recall specific details about each client. "Most of my clients are just regular people looking to upgrade their security," Whitaker said. "I don't ask too many questions. I just provide the service they request." Bosch and Ballard pressed further, asking about any unusual requests or clients who seemed particularly interested in bypassing security systems. Whitaker thought for a moment and then mentioned a recent project where a client had requested extensive modifications to a security system, including features that allowed for discrete access. "This client was very particular," Whitaker said. "They wanted everything to be hidden and unobtrusive. It was one of the most complex installations I've done in a while." Bosch and Ballard exchanged glances. "Do you remember anything else about this client?" Bosch asked. "Anything that might help us identify them?" Whitaker shook his head. "No, I'm afraid not. They paid in cash and didn't provide much information. They seemed to prefer staying out of the limelight." The detectives left Whitaker's house with the understanding that they had more digging to do. They needed to track down the mysterious client who had requested the custom security features. The trail was growing colder, but Bosch and Ballard remained determined to find the truth. Back at the precinct, Garcia continued her investigation into Whitaker's contacts and the dark web forums. She uncovered a few more leads but struggled to find a direct link between Whitaker and the Night Stalker. As they reviewed the new information, Bosch received a call from a fellow detective who had been following up on the Night Stalker case. The detective reported a possible sighting of someone fitting the Night Stalker's description near one of the crime scenes. Bosch and Ballard immediately headed to the location of the sighting, a quiet park on the outskirts of town. They arrived to find the area cordoned off by uniformed officers. As they surveyed the scene, they noticed a series of footprints leading to a nearby wooded area. The detectives followed the trail, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The footprints led them to a small, abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. The cabin appeared to have been recently used, with signs of recent activity and a broken window. Inside the cabin, Bosch and Ballard found evidence that suggested someone had been living there temporarily. There were discarded food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and various personal items scattered around. Among the items, Bosch found a notebook with detailed notes and sketches related to security systems and surveillance equipment. The notes included references to various high-profile targets and mentions of bypassing security measures. "This could be a significant break in the case," Bosch said, examining the notebook. "It looks like the Night Stalker was using this cabin as a base of operations." Ballard nodded. "We need to analyze these notes and see if they provide any leads on the Night Stalker's identity or next move." As they collected the evidence and prepared to leave the cabin, Bosch felt a renewed sense of determination. The investigation was far from over, but each new piece of evidence brought them closer to unraveling the mystery of the Night Stalker and bringing him to justice. Chapter 4. The Hidden Agenda. With the evidence from the abandoned cabin in hand, Bosch and Ballard returned to their precinct. The notebook containing detailed notes and sketches provided a wealth of information about the Night Stalker's methods and potential targets. The detectives knew this could be the key to solving the case, but they needed to sift through the clues and connect the dots.
In the days following the discovery, Garcia and her team worked tirelessly to analyze the notebook. They cross-referenced the notes with existing data on the Night Stalker's previous crimes and found several patterns. The sketches and descriptions in the notebook matched the security systems used in the recent attacks, and there were references to specific locations and methods. Bosch and Ballard met with Garcia to discuss their findings. The notebook provides detailed insights into the Night Stalker's planning process, Garcia explained. It looks like he's been meticulously studying and mapping out his targets. We've also found references to several addresses that don't match any known crime scenes. Ballard reviewed the list of addresses. Are these new locations or just different names for the same places? Garcia shook her head. They appear to be new locations. We should investigate them to see if there's any potential connection to the Night Stalker's activities. Bosch and Ballard agreed to follow up on the new addresses. They split up to cover more ground, with Bosch heading to one set of locations while Ballard investigated the others. Bosch's first stop was a rundown part of town where one of the addresses was located. The area was marked by abandoned buildings and vacant lots. He knocked on the door of a nearby building that matched the description in the notebook but received no response. The building appeared empty, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds. He took photographs of the exterior and moved on to the next address, a small apartment complex with a reputation for housing transient tenants. Bosch spoke with the manager, who informed him that several new tenants had recently moved in, but none of them had been particularly memorable or noteworthy. Bosch's investigation turned up no immediate leads, so he continued to the next address, which was a small office building in a more upscale area. The building had been recently renovated and was currently occupied by a few businesses. Bosch spoke with the building's management and learned that a new tenant had recently moved in, but their identity was protected by a confidentiality agreement. Meanwhile, Ballard's investigation took her to a suburban neighborhood where one of the addresses led her to a quiet house with a well-maintained garden. She spoke with the homeowners, who seemed cooperative but had not noticed anything unusual recently. The house appeared normal, and the residents had no connection to the Night Stalker. Frustrated but determined, Ballard continued her investigation, noting that some of the addresses might be red herrings or misdirections. She took detailed notes and photographs of each location, hoping to find something that would lead them closer to the Night Stalker. Back at the precinct, Bosch and Ballard compared their findings. The addresses they investigated didn't immediately reveal any new connections or suspects, but the notebook's detailed notes indicated that the Night Stalker had a larger agenda, possibly involving multiple targets or a complex plan. Garcia continued to analyze the digital footprints and forum posts related to Night Hunter, trying to find any connections between the online user and the addresses or activities in the notebook. Her investigation revealed that Night Hunter had been communicating with several individuals who had ties to high-security installations and tech industries. One of Garcia's breakthroughs was discovering that Night Hunter had been part of a covert group that specialized in security system modifications. The group had been involved in various projects, including some that matched the detailed descriptions in the notebook. The connections suggested that the Night Stalker might have been working with or influenced by others in this group. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia met to discuss the new leads. It looks like the Night Stalker was not acting alone, Garcia said. The connections to the covert group and their specialized knowledge suggest that there might be multiple individuals involved in this operation. Ballard frowned. If the Night Stalker has collaborators, we need to identify them and figure out their roles in the overall plan. Bosch nodded. We should focus on tracing the group's activities and see if we can identify any key members or patterns that link them to the Night Stalker's crimes. The detectives decided to intensify their investigation into the covert group and its members. They reached out to contacts in the tech industry and security field, seeking information about the group's activities and any potential leads on their operations. As they continued their investigation, Bosch and Ballard felt the pressure mounting. The Night Stalker's hidden agenda was becoming more apparent, but unraveling it required patience and persistence. Each new clue brought them closer to understanding the full scope of the Night Stalker's plan and ultimately stopping him before he could strike again. The detectives knew they were on the brink of a major breakthrough, and they were determined to see the case through to its resolution. The hunt for the Night Stalker was far from over, but Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia remained focused on their goal: bringing the elusive killer to justice. Chapter 5. The Unseen Threat. The investigation into the covert group connected to the Night Stalker continued to reveal new and troubling details. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia spent long hours sifting through data, following leads, and piecing together the fragments of the Night Stalker's intricate plan. The detectives were getting closer, but the complexity of the case made each step forward both critical and challenging. Bosch and Ballard decided to revisit the addresses from the notebook, focusing on any new insights or connections that might have emerged. They hoped that by examining the locations with fresh eyes, they might uncover something previously overlooked. Their first stop was the upscale office building that Bosch had previously investigated. This time, they approached it from a different angle, focusing on the businesses that occupied the building. They spoke with employees and managers, inquiring about any unusual visitors or activities. One of the businesses, a high-tech startup specializing in security software, stood out. The employees mentioned that they had recently hosted a meeting with a potential client who had expressed an intense interest in their security technology. The client had requested specific modifications to their systems, similar to the custom features mentioned in the notebook. Bosch and Ballard followed up with the startup's management to obtain more information about the mysterious client. They learned that the client had paid in cash and requested to remain anonymous. The startup's records revealed that the client had used a pseudonym, an alias that matched one of the names mentioned in the covert group's communications. With this new lead, Bosch and Ballard contacted the startup's owner, who agreed to cooperate. They provided copies of the meeting notes and the pseudonym used by the client. The detectives began to trace the pseudonym, hoping it would lead them to more information about the Night Stalker and his associates. Next, Ballard visited the suburban house where she had previously spoken with the homeowners. This time, she focused on the neighborhood, canvassing nearby residents to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. Her efforts led her to a neighbor who had seen a man acting suspiciously around the time of the Night Stalker's last known activity. The neighbor described the man as tall and wearing a dark coat, matching the description of someone seen near the crime scenes. He had been observed taking photos and making notes, and the neighbor recalled that he had driven a dark-colored SUV. Ballard took down the details and used them to narrow down potential leads. The description of the SUV matched a vehicle registered to one of the names connected to the covert group. The detectives decided to track down the vehicle and its owner for further questioning. Meanwhile, Garcia continued her deep dive into the digital records and online forums associated with the covert group. She discovered that the group had been involved in several high-stakes operations, including security upgrades for high-profile clients and sensitive projects. The group's connections to the Night Stalker became clearer, and it appeared that the group had provided the Night Stalker with advanced tools and information to execute his crimes. Garcia found a significant breakthrough when she uncovered an encrypted communication between members of the covert group. The message contained references to a secret meeting planned for the following week, a meeting that was set to take place at a secluded location outside the city. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia knew this meeting could be pivotal in understanding the full scope of the Night Stalker's operation. They decided to prepare for surveillance and infiltration to gather more evidence and identify key members of the group. As they made their plans, Bosch and Ballard continued to follow up on the pseudonym and the SUV linked to the covert group. They found that the SUV was registered to a shell company, which in turn was linked to several other businesses involved in high-security projects. The trail was leading them closer to uncovering the Night Stalker's network and his hidden agenda.
The upcoming secret meeting was scheduled to be a critical point in the investigation. The detectives needed to be strategic and cautious in their approach, ensuring that they did not compromise their case or alert the suspects to their presence. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia prepared their surveillance equipment and set up a plan to monitor the meeting closely. They knew that this operation required precision and careful coordination to avoid any potential pitfalls. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. With each new piece of evidence, the detectives were piecing together the puzzle of the Night Stalker's plan. They were determined to stay one step ahead of the elusive killer and his network, and they knew that the upcoming meeting could be the key to unraveling the mystery and bringing the Night Stalker to justice. Chapter 6. The Meeting. The night of the covert group's secret meeting arrived, and Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia were ready. They had positioned themselves at strategic points around the secluded location, a remote estate nestled deep in the woods. The property was surrounded by high fences and dense foliage, making it ideal for discreet gatherings. The detectives had set up surveillance equipment and coordinated with their team to ensure they could capture every moment of the meeting. As the sun began to set, the estate was shrouded in darkness. Bosch and Ballard approached their designated observation points, carefully navigating the terrain to avoid detection. Garcia monitored the live feed from a nearby van, keeping a close watch on the security cameras and communication channels. Bosch took his position behind a cluster of trees, where he had a clear view of the estate's entrance. The estate was lit with dim, strategically placed lights, casting long shadows across the grounds. Bosch could see a few vehicles parked near the main building, their headlights briefly illuminating the area as they arrived. Ballard was stationed at a vantage point on the opposite side of the estate, where she could observe any movement around the perimeter. She used night vision goggles to scan the area, looking for any signs of activity or additional security measures. As the minutes ticked by, the tension grew. Bosch and Ballard communicated via earpieces, sharing observations and updates. Garcia provided real-time analysis of the surveillance feed, noting the arrival of several individuals who matched the descriptions of the covert group's members. The first group of attendees consisted of individuals dressed in dark, formal attire, clearly intended to blend into the night. They entered the estate's main building, where they were met by a host who checked their credentials before allowing them inside. Garcia focused on capturing the attendees' faces and matching them with the profiles they had on file. The meeting began in a large conference room within the estate. Bosch and Ballard could see through the windows as the attendees took their seats around a large table. The room was equipped with sophisticated audiovisual equipment, suggesting that the meeting was of significant importance. Garcia noticed a familiar face among the attendees, the same pseudonymous client who had been linked to the high-tech startup. The presence of this individual confirmed their suspicions about the covert group's involvement in the Night Stalker's operations. The discussion started with a review of the group's recent projects and successes. The attendees discussed various high-security contracts and shared updates on their ongoing activities. The conversation then shifted to the Night Stalker, with detailed plans and strategies being presented. Bosch and Ballard listened intently as the attendees discussed the Night Stalker's next targets and methods. They heard specific details about upcoming heists, including the types of security systems and locations that would be targeted. The information revealed the extent of the Night Stalker's network and the sophistication of the operations. The meeting also included a discussion about potential risks and countermeasures. The group's members strategized ways to avoid detection and enhance their security protocols. Bosch and Ballard realized that the Night Stalker was not just a lone operator but was part of a well-organized network with significant resources and expertise. As the meeting progressed, Garcia picked up on a critical piece of information: a plan to execute a high-profile heist in the coming weeks. The details were discussed in hushed tones, with a focus on timing, logistics, and the involvement of specific individuals. The heist was set to target a major financial institution with a reputation for handling large sums of money. Bosch and Ballard knew that they had to act quickly to prevent the heist and apprehend the members of the covert group. They prepared to move in, coordinating with their team to execute a plan for surveillance and arrest. As the meeting concluded, the attendees began to leave the estate. Bosch and Ballard carefully tracked their movements, ensuring that they captured as much information as possible. Garcia continued to document the proceedings, gathering evidence that would be crucial in building a case against the group. With the meeting over and the attendees dispersing, Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia regrouped to discuss their next steps. They reviewed the evidence and planned their approach for the upcoming operation. The information gathered from the meeting had provided them with valuable insights into the Night Stalker's network and his plans. The The detectives were determined to use the evidence to their advantage and take decisive action to thwart the Night Stalker's upcoming heist. They knew that time was of the essence, and they were prepared to use every resource at their disposal to bring the Night Stalker and his associates to justice. Chapter 7. The Countdown. With the critical information obtained from the secret meeting, Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia faced a race against time. The upcoming heist at the financial institution was a significant threat, and they needed to act swiftly to prevent it. The details from the meeting provided a clear window into the Night Stalker's plans, and the detectives were determined to use this intelligence to their advantage. Garcia worked tirelessly to analyze the data from the meeting. She cross-referenced the details of the heist with the security measures at the financial institution and identified key vulnerabilities that the Night Stalker's network might exploit. The heist was scheduled for a specific date and time, and the detectives had to ensure they were prepared for every possible scenario. Bosch and Ballard coordinated with their colleagues, setting up a comprehensive plan to thwart the heist. They established a security perimeter around the financial institution and deployed undercover officers to monitor the area. The goal was to intercept the Night Stalker's network before they could execute their plan. As the date of the heist approached, the tension among the detectives grew. They conducted multiple briefings and simulations to ensure that their team was prepared for any contingencies. The plan involved a coordinated effort between various law enforcement agencies, including local police, federal agents, and specialized units. Bosch and Ballard conducted their final reconnaissance of the financial institution. They reviewed security protocols, observed employee routines, and identified key entry and exit points. Their goal was to anticipate the Night Stalker's movements and ensure that they could respond quickly if the heist was attempted. The night before the heist, Bosch and Ballard were on high alert. They conducted a final sweep of the area, checking communication lines and ensuring that all surveillance equipment was operational. Garcia remained at the command center, monitoring live feeds and coordinating with other units. As the clock ticked closer to the scheduled time of the heist, Bosch and Ballard felt the weight of the operation's significance. They knew that this was a critical moment in their investigation, and their actions would determine the outcome. The pressure was immense, but they remained focused on their objective. At the designated time, the Night Stalker's network began to put their plan into motion. The detectives observed the arrival of several vehicles, each matching the descriptions from the meeting. The vehicles parked in strategic locations around the financial institution, and individuals dressed in dark, tactical gear exited and moved into position. Bosch and Ballard coordinated their response, directing their team to surround the area and prepare for engagement. They used their knowledge of the Night Stalker's methods to anticipate the group's actions and plan their intervention accordingly. As the Night Stalker's network began to breach the institution's security, the undercover officers moved in to intercept them. The operation unfolded with precision, and the detectives managed to apprehend several members of the network before they could fully execute their plan. The heist was thwarted, and the financial institution remained secure. The operation was a success, but Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia knew that their work was not yet complete. They had apprehended key members of the Night Stalker's network, but the elusive killer himself was still at large. In the aftermath of the operation, the detectives conducted interrogations and debriefings with the captured suspects. The information obtained from these sessions provided additional insights into the Night Stalker's activities and network. Bosch and Ballard worked tirelessly to piece together the final elements of the case. With the heist thwarted and the network's operations disrupted, the detectives were closing in on the Night Stalker. They continued their investigation, using the new evidence to track the killer's whereabouts and motives. The final stages of the case were approaching, and the detectives remained determined to bring the elusive killer to justice. The Night Stalker's reign of terror was nearing its end, and Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia were resolute in their commitment to solving the case. They knew that the final confrontation with the Night Stalker was imminent, and they were prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. The investigation into the Night Stalker had reached its climax. With the heist thwarted and several members of the covert group in custody, Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia were closing in on the elusive killer. The last piece of the puzzle was locating and apprehending the Night Stalker himself. The detectives continued to piece together the final clues from their interrogations and surveillance. They had identified a potential location where the Night Stalker might be hiding, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The warehouse was known for its isolation and had been previously linked to illicit activities. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia coordinated with their team to plan a final operation to capture the Night Stalker. They prepared for a high-stakes confrontation, knowing that the killer was likely to be desperate and dangerous. The operation involved multiple law enforcement agencies, and the team was ready for any contingencies. As night fell, Bosch and Ballard arrived at the warehouse with their team. They conducted a thorough reconnaissance of the area, using surveillance equipment and tactical gear. The warehouse was dimly lit, and the surroundings were eerily quiet. The detectives approached with caution, knowing that the Night Stalker could be waiting for them. Garcia remained at the command center, monitoring live feeds and providing real-time updates to the team. She had gathered intelligence on the warehouse's layout and potential entry points, which proved invaluable for the operation. The team was prepared to breach the warehouse and apprehend the Night Stalker. The moment of truth arrived as Bosch and Ballard led their team into the warehouse. The operation was executed with precision, and the detectives carefully cleared each room, searching for the Night Stalker. The atmosphere was tense, with every shadow and sound heightening the sense of danger. As they reached the central part of the warehouse, Bosch spotted a figure moving in the shadows. The Night Stalker had been waiting for them, and the confrontation was imminent. The detectives prepared for a face-to-face encounter, knowing that this was the culmination of their long and challenging investigation. The Night Stalker, wearing a dark mask and tactical gear, confronted the detectives with a chilling calmness. He was armed and appeared to be ready for a fight. The standoff was intense, with both sides locked in a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Bosch and Ballard used their training and experience to de-escalate the situation. They attempted to negotiate with the Night Stalker, hoping to convince him to surrender peacefully. The killer, however, was resolute and seemed determined to go down fighting. The confrontation quickly escalated into a tense and dramatic exchange. The Night Stalker's movements were calculated and precise, but the detectives were equally determined. The standoff reached its peak as Bosch and Ballard executed a coordinated strategy to disarm and apprehend the Night Stalker. In a dramatic turn of events, Bosch managed to disarm the Night Stalker and restrain him. The apprehension was a relief, but the detectives knew that their work was not yet complete. They needed to gather additional evidence and ensure that the Night Stalker would face justice for his crimes. As the Night Stalker was taken into custody, Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia reviewed the final pieces of evidence. The case had been resolved, but the impact of the Night Stalker's actions would be felt for a long time. The detectives were satisfied with their efforts but remained mindful of the complexities of the case. The investigation had been a challenging journey, and the resolution of the case marked the end of a significant chapter in their careers. Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia were grateful for the support of their team and the opportunity to bring the Night Stalker to justice. As they looked back on the case, the detectives reflected on the lessons learned and the sacrifices made. The Night Stalker's reign of terror was over, and the city could finally begin to heal from the impact of his crimes. The case had tested their skills, resolve, and teamwork, and the detectives were proud of their achievements. With the Night Stalker behind bars, Bosch, Ballard, and Garcia could finally close this chapter and move forward, knowing that justice had been served. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.